My name is Selena. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a public relations specialist at a major event planning company in Boston. I've built a steady career, learned to manage clients with impossible demands, and developed a reputation for solving the unsolvable. I'm proud of what I've accomplished, but if you asked my family, they'd tell you I'm just the pretty one. That label has followed me for as long as I can remember, like a weight I was never allowed to put down. According to my parents, I was the beautiful child, the one who smiled sweetly in family photos, but was never expected to contribute much beyond looking presentable. My younger sister, Vivian, was the real star. She was the family's pride, the intelligent, disciplined, ambitious one. At least, that's the story my parents chose to believe. They clung to it so tightly that there was never room for any other version of me to exist. My mother, Margaret, is a well-respected teacher known for her sharp tongue and even sharper expectations. My father, David, is a successful lawyer who speaks in measured words, but his silence can cut just as deeply. Both of them made it clear, in ways loud and quiet, that Vivian was their favorite. They never said it out loud, of course. No parent would, but it was written between every line of every conversation. At family gatherings, I was the accessory. I was the daughter whose place was to smile, to serve appetizers, to look polished but stay quiet. When I landed a major PR contract last year, my father barely looked up from his plate. He congratulated me the way someone might acknowledge the weather pleasant, but irrelevant. Meanwhile, when Vivian passed an advanced medical exam, they threw her a dinner party. My mother even teared up. It wasn't always like this, at least not in the way that I noticed. As children, Vivian and I played together, argued like sisters do, and I thought the differences in how we were treated were small things. A compliment here, a scolding there. I thought it would even out. But as we grew older, the distance widened. My achievements became inconveniences to them, reminders that I wasn't content with just being decorative. Still, I stayed. I smiled. I shrank myself when necessary. I told myself that being the peacemaker was noble, that making room for Vivian would eventually earn me respect. I thought if I supported her, if I let her shine, she would finally see me as her sister, not her competition. But as Vivian's wedding approached, the careful balance I had tried so hard to maintain began to crumble. I thought I was giving her what she wanted. I thought I was keeping the peace. I was wrong. In my family, some people are born to be celebrated. Others are born to stand in the background. I used to believe I was the latter. I don't believe that anymore. But I don't believe that anymore. The moment I stopped accepting my place in the background, everything around me began to shift subtly at first, then all at once. It began 6 months before Vivian's wedding when she announced her engagement to Lucas, a young, well-established doctor from a family that practically lived in the pages of high society magazines. The moment Lucas entered our lives, my parents acted as if Vivian had secured not just a husband, but our family's ticket to some new level of social status. Their excitement was almost frantic, an eager scramble to impress Lucas's parents, to prove we were worthy of their attention. Vivian thrived in this environment. She soaked in the praise, the attention, the endless compliments about what a perfect match she and Lucas made. I wanted to be happy for her, I truly did. But something about the way she glanced at me in those moments, sharp and watchful, told me that she wasn't convinced I could stay out of her way. A few weeks after the engagement, I received a text from my mother. Vivian would like you to be a bridesmaid. The wording was carefully chosen. Vivian would like... It wasn't an invitation. It was an obligation. I understood immediately why I was included. If I hadn't been, people would ask questions. My absence would have been noticed, and keeping up the image of a perfect, supportive family was far more important to them than whether I actually wanted to be there. I agreed without argument. I told myself I could endure this. It would be a few months of discomfort, of walking on eggshells, and then it would be over. I was wrong. From the start, the rules for me were different. Vivian picked out my bridesmaid dress personally a dull, shapeless beige gown that did nothing for me. When I gently suggested another style, my mother shot me a warning look. "It's not your day. Selena, please don't make this difficult." The first pre-wedding event was the engagement party. I wore the dress Vivian selected, tied my hair back in a low, plain bun, and kept my makeup minimal. I stayed out of conversations unless spoken to, hovered near the edge of the room, poured drinks, served cake, made myself useful but invisible. Still, somehow, I failed. I overheard Lucas's cousin, Julia, telling him how lovely I looked, that I must be a model. I saw the way Lucas smiled politely but didn't correct her. I didn't mean for that moment to happen. But Vivian's glare from across the room burned into me like a silent accusation. Later that evening, as I helped clean up in the kitchen, I overheard my mother talking quietly with Vivian. "Selena is behaving, but you know how men always notice her. We'll need to be careful at the wedding." Vivian's voice, brittle with frustration, cut through. Maybe she should wear something even more plain, or sit somewhere in the ceremony where no one will see her. They didn't know I heard. I didn't confront them. I simply swallowed the sting and pressed forward. At the bridal shower, the pattern repeated. I spent hours hand-making decorations, carefully designing centerpieces, folding napkins into perfect shapes. I thought I was helping. Lucas's mother complimented me in front of everyone. "Selena, you have such a talent for these things," she said kindly. "The room looks beautiful because of you. I didn't see Vivian until I found her crying in the bathroom. Why can't you just stay in the background?" she choked out. "Why do you always have to make people notice you?" I apologized again, though I didn't know what I was apologizing for. I hadn't tried to stand out. I hadn't wanted any attention. But in Vivian's mind, my mere existence was enough to make her feel overshadowed. As the months passed, the restrictions piled up. My mother demanded I show her my outfit choices in advance. She vetoed anything she deemed too flattering. She even insisted that I stop wearing high heels to family events because I was too tall next to Vivian in photos. Vivian added her own conditions. I wasn't allowed to post any pictures of myself from wedding events. I wasn't to speak too long with Lucas's friends. I wasn't to stand near the groom or his family during group photos. And yet, despite my best efforts to comply, there was always something. If a waiter smiled at me, if a family friend complimented my hair, if someone simply started a conversation with me, each time it was another strike against me in Vivian's mind. Each time, she would pull me aside, quietly furious, as though I was deliberately sabotaging her. The weight of these months wore me down. I told myself I was keeping the peace, that this would all pass. But the closer we got to the wedding, the more I realized this was never about peace. This was about control, and they would never be satisfied until I was completely invisible. I just didn't know then how far they were willing to go to make that happen. But I didn't know then how far they were willing to go to make that happen. I thought I could still survive the wedding weekend if I just kept my head down. I thought that following their endless rules would be enough. But some battles are lost before you even know you're fighting them. The rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding was the beginning of the end. It was a small, elegant affair at a restaurant that overlooked the harbor. I had followed every instruction I wore, the dull, oversized navy dress Vivian had picked for me. I wore flat shoes. My hair was pulled back tightly, not a strand out of place. I barely spoke unless someone addressed me directly. I took every precaution, every step to ensure that I would not attract attention. But attention, it seemed, found me anyway. Adrian, Lucas's older brother, was seated next to me at dinner. He was warm, engaging, and treated me like an actual person instead of the ghost my family preferred me to be. When he asked me how I knew the couple, I simply said I was Vivian's sister. His eyes widened slightly. "You two are sisters I wouldn't have guessed. You both are beautiful, but in such different ways." I gave him a polite, distant smile, not wanting to encourage the conversation. "Vivian is the real beauty," I said, keeping my voice low. "Tonight is about her." Adrian shook his head gently. That's not how I see it. His gaze lingered, kind but uncomfortably attentive. You have a presence. And your hair? It's stunning. I've never seen that shade before. I stiffened, acutely aware that my mother had been watching from a few seats away. When I glanced over, I caught her whispering fiercely to Vivian, both of them cutting glances toward me. I could practically feel the heat of their fury from across the table. Vivian excused herself shortly after, and I found her in the restroom, her makeup smudged, her breathing uneven. You always do this, she hissed. You can't stand for me to have a single day where I'm the center. I stared at her, stunned. Adrian was just making conversation. I didn't do anything. Her hands trembled as she clutched a tissue. His mother asked if we were both models. She said we had the same cheekbones. Why can't you just stop? Why can't you ever let me have something without stealing part of it? I'm not stealing anything, I pleaded, my voice cracking. I didn't ask for this. I've done everything you wanted. I wore the ugly dress. I've kept quiet. I've stayed out of the pictures. Vivian shook her head violently. It's never enough with you. Even when you try to disappear, people still notice you. I spent nearly an hour calming her down, helping her reapply her makeup, convincing her that everyone was there to celebrate her. I told her she was beautiful, that she was the perfect bride-to-be, that no one could possibly outshine her. When she finally stopped crying, she hugged me in a moment of rare softness. Thank you, she whispered. I'm glad you'll be there tomorrow. Her words filled me with a strange kind of hope. Maybe things would finally change between us. Maybe the wedding would bring us closer. That night, back at my parents' house, I knocked on Vivian's door with a small piece offering a box of her favorite homemade macarons. We sat together like we used to when we were kids, knees touching, sharing quiet stories. She admitted she was scared. What if I'm not enough for Lucas? She whispered. What if he changes his mind? I squeezed her hand and told her Lucas loved her. I meant it. I believed that if I could just keep supporting her, she would stop seeing me as a threat. I went to bed thinking tomorrow would be a good day. That maybe, finally, we would be sisters again. I was wrong. The sensation of something brushing against my cheek woke me in the early hours of the morning. Disoriented, I reached up and felt something soft fall into my hand. I sat up quickly, more hair falling around me. My heart slammed against my ribs as I touched my head. My hair was uneven, ragged, hacked in random patches. Standing at the foot of my bed, calm and composed, was my mother, a pair of scissors dangling from her hand. Mom, I gasped, breathless. What did you do? Her voice was steady, frighteningly rational. What needed to be done? She said. This is Vivian's day. You've had your share of attention. Now it's her turn. I scrambled out of bed and ran to the mirror. My reflection was a stranger. My once long, carefully kept hair had been butchered into uneven tufts. Some spots were cut so close to the scalp that I could see patches of bare skin. Why would you do this? I choked out, tears flooding my eyes. My father appeared in the doorway, his expression hard, his voice flat. You should be grateful. Maybe now people will finally stop envying you and start pitying you. I wanted to scream, to rage, to collapse. But all I could do was lock myself in the bathroom and slide to the floor, my hands shaking as I touched the ruined pieces of myself. I sat there for hours, consumed by waves of disbelief and grief. My parents had crossed a line I hadn't thought possible. I thought they would protect me. But I finally understood. They never intended to. They never intended to. Sitting on the cold bathroom floor, clutching the uneven remains of my hair, I finally accepted that I had been nothing more than a disposable piece in their perfect family portrait. When I eventually tried to call my best friend, my phone was gone. My bag had been emptied. My wallet, my keys, Every personal belonging had mysteriously disappeared from the guest room where I was staying. I pounded on the bathroom door, my voice cracking as I demanded my phone. From the other side, my mother's calm reply drifted through the wood like a practiced excuse. "We've put your things somewhere safe. We can't have you causing more drama right now. You're not calling anyone. You'll be fine after the wedding." The weight of those words pressed down on me. I wasn't a daughter in that moment. I was a problem to be managed. By mid-morning, my mother knocked on the door again. "We have a hair appointment for you," she said cheerfully, as if we were just going out for brunch. "Marina, the wedding stylist, will help you fix it into something manageable. Let's not make this any harder than it has to be. Selena." I didn't respond. I didn't have the energy to scream or argue. Something inside me had gone numb. I stepped out eventually, wearing the first thing I could find, an old, oversized hoodie I'd forgotten I'd left at my parents' house years ago. At the salon, Marina's eyes widened the moment she saw the damage. "What happened?" she whispered, horrified. Before I could open my mouth, my mother spoke over me. "Selena had a little breakdown. She tried to cut out some gum that got stuck in her hair and, well, she panicked. Teenagers. Right, I was 28. Marina met my eyes in the mirror, searching for the truth. I couldn't speak. Not yet. But I saw her hesitate. Saw her understanding bloom silently behind her professional mask. She didn't argue. She just began cutting, carefully shaping the jagged mess into the shortest pixie cut I'd ever seen. When my mother left the room to check on Vivian's preparations, Marina leaned close and whispered, "If anyone asks, I'll tell the truth." That promise, small as it was, felt like the first crack in the prison they'd built around me. Back at the house, I was given the bridesmaid dress 2 sizes too large, deliberately chosen to drown me in fabric. The lavender color washed me out. When the makeup artist tried to add some vibrance to my face, my mother interrupted, "No, just light powder and lip balm. Nothing more. We want Selena to look natural." Natural, in their language, meant invisible. At the church, the stares followed me like knives. Friends, distant relatives, family friends all looking at me with a mixture of confusion and pity. My mother's version of events had spread quickly. Poor Selena. So unstable, so fragile. She'd apparently had a mental breakdown and cut her own hair in some desperate cry for attention. The only person who looked at me with something resembling the truth was Adrian. He found me before the ceremony, pulling me aside near the back pews. "You didn't do this to yourself," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. I couldn't speak. I only managed to shake my head. "You don't have to explain," he added, his voice soft but steady. "Just know that I see you." His kindness nearly shattered me, but I forced myself to stay composed. I had been silenced all day. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. During the ceremony, I walked down the aisle, mechanically holding my bouquet, every step heavy with humiliation. I stood at the far end of the bridesmaid line, positioned deliberately behind one of the larger floral arrangements, my figure partially obscured in every photo. When the photographer arranged us for group shots, I heard him murmur to my mother, "Perhaps Selena can sit in the front row for this one. She's petite. It will balance the frame." My mother smiled tightly. "Actually, let's get a few without her first, just to have options." They took picture after picture, each one reinforcing the same message: I was unwanted. I was disposable. I didn't belong. I moved through the reception like a ghost. I was seated far from the head table, isolated at the edge of the hall with a few distant cousins I barely knew. I overheard my parents explaining the situation to guests in hushed, performative concern. "Selena has always struggled with attention," my father told one of his colleagues. "She couldn't quite handle that this day wasn't about her." Even Vivian played her part flawlessly, offering sympathetic sighs and explaining to her friends, "It's been hard for Selena. were trying to support her through this difficult time. They were brilliant liars, and most of the guests believed them, but not Adrian. As he sat down across from me, I realized he wasn't fooled. "Whatever happened," he said, his eyes steady on mine, "you didn't deserve it." His words should have comforted me, but instead, they hardened something inside me, because I realized he was right. I didn't deserve it, and I wasn't going to let them walk away from this unscathed. I wasn't going to let them walk away from this unscathed. For years, I had allowed myself to be their scapegoat, their shadow, their silent casualty. But something inside me had snapped, and this time, I wouldn't just endure, I would reclaim what they tried to destroy. The reception was still in full swing when I quietly slipped away from my isolated table. I found Adrian near the hallway that led to the parking lot. He was the only person who had looked at me with honesty that day, and now I needed his help. "I need to get out of here," I said, my voice low, controlled. His eyes sharpened with concern. "Where do you need to go somewhere to make this right?" I replied. "But I don't have my phone. My car keys. My parents took everything." Without hesitation, he handed me his car keys. "I'll cover for you. I'll tell them you needed air." It was such a simple gesture, but it cracked through the coldness I'd wrapped around myself. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded, no questions asked. I drove his car to a nearby pharmacy, my mind spinning with sharp, methodical focus. I purchased a small bottle of clear, concentrated itching powder solution, odorless, colorless, undetectable. I also picked up a sewing kit, gloves, and a burner phone. I wouldn't make the mistake of leaving a trail. Back at the venue, I timed my re-entry perfectly. During the bouquet toss, when the bridal party was distracted, I slipped into the back hall and approached Sarah, the wedding coordinator. "Vivian asked me to leave a surprise in the bridal suite," I told her smoothly. "A personal touch for Lucas?" Sarah smiled, oblivious. "Oh, that's so sweet. I can let you in now if you'd like." I shook my head quickly. "Actually, Vivian asked me to keep it secret from everyone, even you. She wants it to be a complete surprise." Sarah's face lit up with understanding. "Of course. Here's the master key. Just return it in 20 minutes. With the key in hand, I moved quickly. In the bridal suite, I found the delicate silk lingerie laid out on the bed. I applied the itching powder solution carefully, focusing on areas where it would have maximum skin contact. I then opened Vivian's honeymoon suitcase and treated selected pieces of clothing, her swimsuits, her sleepwear, even the cotton shirts she'd planned to wear in Bali's humidity. The solution would dry invisible, but once warmed by body heat, it would cause relentless itching, impossible to ignore. I wasn't finished. I also found their flight itinerary tucked inside a folder. Using my knowledge of event coordination systems and industry contacts, I contacted the airline through the burner phone. I requested a flight change under the wedding party's account, nothing drastic, just enough to push their departure to 3 hours later. I knew their luggage would still be tagged to the original flight, meaning it would arrive in Bali long before they did, unattended, vulnerable, before leaving. I took photos of the room and replaced their original boarding passes with carefully crafted duplicates that matched the new flight time. Everything looked authentic. No one would notice until it was too late. I returned the key to Sarah with a grateful smile, thanked her, and melted back into the crowd as if nothing had happened. Adrian found me later near the dessert table. "Did you get what you needed?" I handed him back his car keys. "Yes." And Adrian, "Thank you for trusting me." His gaze softened. "You deserve someone to trust you." His belief in me added a strange weight to my chest, but I pushed it aside. There was still more to do. I borrowed another bridesmaid's phone under the pretense of checking the time. Within seconds, I accessed Vivian's cloud storage and social media accounts. She'd always been careless with passwords. Most of them were combinations of our childhood pets' names and her birthday. I downloaded several photos from the wedding, particularly the unflattering ones she would never have posted herself, and scheduled them to appear automatically on her accounts throughout her honeymoon. Each caption was carefully worded to sound like her, but subtly self-centered and ridiculous, feeling like the most stunning bride in history, sorry to every other bride out there. Enough to make people cringe and question her state of mind, but not overtly malicious. Finally, I compiled and sent an anonymous email to the hospital where Vivian had recently applied for a new position. Attached were her real academic records, including the discrepancies she had carefully hidden. I knew an internal review would follow. Even if she survived it, the stain would linger. Everything I set in motion was calculated. Each thread was distant enough from me to prevent direct blame, yet interconnected enough to unravel her perfect narrative. As I returned to the reception, my mother passed by me, her smile brittle. "You're not thinking of causing a scene, are you?" I met her gaze steadily. "No, of course not," I replied calmly. "I've accepted everything exactly as it is." She walked away, satisfied, but she had no idea that I was already dismantling the world they'd built piece by piece, quietly, and with precision. I had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. She had no idea I was already dismantling the world they'd built quietly. Precisely. Piece by piece. And when it finally collapsed, I wouldn't be there to watch it burn. I didn't need to be. The first cracks appeared sooner than I expected. Just hours after the wedding, while the guests still lingered and the cleanup crews began packing away decorations, I left. No goodbyes, no explanations. I booked a hotel room using the bridesmaid's phone I had briefly borrowed and slipped away without a trace. In that quiet room, I completed the final steps. I confirmed the scheduled posts on Vivian's social media were active. I sent the anonymous email about her academic discrepancies. I finished arranging the details of their altered flights. I left no loose ends. 2 days later, while they were still flying to Bali, the itching powder did its work. Through my burner phone, I watched as the hotel's security camera sent me a silent notification from the bridal suite. I saw Vivian and Lucas in frantic confusion, scratching, pacing, tossing sheets aside, calling the front desk at 30 demanding new bedding and accusing the hotel of a laundry disaster. I didn't feel triumphant watching it. I didn't feel guilty either. I felt something closer to clarity. When they missed their original flight home because of the tickets I'd switched, their luggage traveled ahead of them, unattended for hours. Their honeymoon became a trail of inconvenience and mounting embarrassment. Vivian's scheduled social media posts went live like clockwork, each one slightly ridiculous, each one eroding the carefully polished image she had spent years curating. By the time they returned, Vivian's workplace had already launched an internal review. Adrian later told me Lucas's family was quietly mortified by how many coincidences had marred the trip, but none of it could ever be traced back to me. I didn't stay to see it unfold. I had already moved. Within weeks, I relocated to New York, stepping into a new position at a boutique PR firm that valued my ideas, my presence, my work. I rented a small apartment overlooking the city skyline, one I could afford without anyone's signature on my lease. No more co-signed agreements, no more obligations disguised as support. The calls from my family came in waves. First were the demands. Then came the desperate voicemails. Finally, there were the guilt-laden texts. My mother sent a hair salon voucher with a note that read, "Let's start over." My father left clipped messages about family duty and moving forward. Vivian's texts ranged from cold accusations, "I know it was you," to artificial warmth. "We should be sisters again." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Adrian found me in New York a few months later. He invited me for coffee, and I said yes. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. It was simply honest. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need the full story to understand me. "You're the strongest person I know," he said quietly, as we sat together in a small cafe overlooking the street. "You've lived through things most people would never recover from, and you still built something better." We began seeing each other regularly. No pretense, no expectations. Just two people choosing each other. free of the suffocating weight of our families. 1 year after Vivian's wedding, I married Adrian in a small ceremony. No extended family, no borrowed traditions, just a handful of genuine friends. People who celebrated me, not for how well I fit their expectations, but for who I actually was. I didn't send invitations to my family. I didn't owe them that. Our wedding was simple. It was quiet. It was everything theirs had pretended to be. The morning before the ceremony, I stood alone in my apartment, looking at myself in the mirror. My hair had grown into a soft, shoulder-length cut that framed my face in a way I never would have dared to try before. I ran my fingers through it, pausing to take in the reflection staring back at me. She was not the same woman who had once begged for a place in her family's narrative. She was not waiting for their permission to exist. I picked up my bouquet, steady and sure, and walked to the door. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their applause. Some things cannot be taken from you. Not by cruelty, not by silence, not even by blood. Dignity isn't something you borrow. It isn't something you prove. It's something you choose. And I had finally chosen mine. I stepped out of the apartment and quietly closed the door behind me.